Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I managed to finish in the month of August. So this is my August wrap-up. I would say that this was a bit of a down month for me. Normally I try to finish between 10 or 12 books, and this month I managed to finish 8 books with 1 DNF. I wonder what the DNF would be. I don't know. Anyway, enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. And first off, I was obviously alluding to Valor by Gwynne, the second book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. I read Malice in July, and I overall enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I gave it 4 stars, and I was, I wouldn't say eager to read this book, but I was somewhat excited to jump into it. And you know, it wasn't a quick DNF. It's not like I read the first few chapters and decided to DNF it. I got pretty far into it, almost halfway, and I just wasn't, I don't know. A lot of people said that this book is just a huge leap in improvement from Malice, and I wasn't feeling that. And I didn't have that sparking moment where I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I love the series. And it just kind of felt more the same, honestly, from Malice. And I didn't like that the chapters, it's about the same length as Malice, but there's way more chapters, and the chapters are way smaller, and it just feels really clunky. And he just keeps adding more and more perspectives. And the running joke is that all of the characters start with the letter C. And yeah, I just DNF'd it. I'm not gonna say it's a permanent DNF, because I did buy the whole series right here. I bought the box set. So that would be a waste of money if I just completely dismiss this as a potential series to read. But for now, I'm going to temporarily DNF it, and maybe I'll jump back into it in a future date. So now that we got the DNF out of the way, let's go ahead and discuss all of the books that I managed to finish in the month of August. And of course, being a constant reader that I am, you guys know that I read Billy Summers, which is Stephen King's newest novel. And I have a review on my channel if you guys haven't seen it yet. And spoiler alert, I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Not a perfect novel, obviously, but it was very, very good. I had a blast reading this, and I buddy read it with a lot of people in various Discords, including my own. And I would say most people gave this book at least 4 stars, if not 4.5 stars. I didn't see a lot of people give it 5 stars, so not a lot of people absolutely loved it. But again, I didn't see too many people give it less than 4 stars. So a lot of people thought this was just a very solid, new Stephen King book. And I would tend to agree. And I will say that the character himself, Billy Summers, is hands down one of the best protagonists that King has written in a very long time. Probably the past 10 or 15 years. Probably since something like Doomakey and Eggert Freemantle. Billy Summers is right up there with the best Stephen King protagonists. So yes, overall, this was a terrific book and a terrific start to the month of August. And then we transition to kind of the biggest disappointment in the month, which would be Nightfall by Daniel Barnett, which is the first volume in the Nightmareland Chronicles. And I didn't hate the book, but I went into it expecting to love it, and I just thought it was kind of okay. I gave it 2 stars, and it's not for me. I get what Daniel Barnett was going with the novel, but I just couldn't really connect to it and it was a little confusing at times, which makes sense because I think it's supposed to be kind of like a fever dream of a novel, and it's supposed to emulate the chaos of what the world would actually be like if the sun actually kind of like disappeared. So it makes sense, but also it just didn't make for a very good reading experience for me personally, which is a shame because Daniel Barnett is a really cool dude. I watched a live stream on someone's channel where he talked about Dr. Sleep, the movie, and they were comparing it to the book, and Daniel had a lot of good insight on Stephen King, which obviously pleases me greatly. So Daniel is a cool dude. I just, I'm being completely honest here. I wasn't a huge fan of Nightfall, but there's plenty of people who absolutely love this book, like Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads and Leslie from The Nerdy Narrative. They are in love with this author and this series, so please don't let me dissuade you from at least trying this first book out, because it is worth reading, and I'm sure a lot of people, if you're a fan of horror, will love this series. And the next book I read was A Veil of Spears, which is book 3 in the Song of Shattered Sand series by Bradley P. Bulio. Now, I've read the first 2 books this year, and those were both rereads for me. Those are both 5-star books. They were excellent reads. I loved them probably more the second time. And then this third book I have actually never read before, so this was the first time reading this book, and I jumped right into it after reading the first 2 books, and I did love it, but I didn't quite love it as much as books 1 or 2. But don't get me wrong, it's still amazing, and it has fantastic character work. It has fantastic just action scenes, and just the plot is like, it's all over the place, and it's very sort of unpredictable and goes in a lot of different directions. My main criticism with the book is that we get introduced to an extra character perspective, and while it doesn't take up a lot of space in the book, I think the character only gets around like 5 or 6 chapters. Those were probably my least favorite chapters, and I wasn't a huge fan of them, but that only knocks it down half a star. This was a 4.5-star book for me, and I will definitely be continuing on with book 4 sometime in the near future. And now jumping on over to the horror side of things again, we have The Least of My Scars by Stephen Graham Jones. And if Nightfall was a fever dream of a novel, this was also a fever dream of a novel, in the way that this is about a serial killer, but you can't really tell what is real and what is actually happening or not, or what is fiction or what is just kind of him hallucinating things. It's very hard to tell, and this book is just kind of, I don't know, it's all over the place. The ending of the novel was a little weird and confusing, so I had to ask the Stephen Graham Jones experts, Leslie and Evie, to kind of like walk me through and explain what was actually happening the entire time. And their explanation makes sense, and I kind of want to go back and reread it sometime in the future, and everything will, kind of make more sense. But even if I didn't quite grasp what was going on, this was still a very entertaining, somewhat funny, and very disturbing serial killer book. And I'm starting to really like Stephen Graham Jones. I read The Only Good Indians, which is a terrific book. Mongrels was okay, but not my favorite. I think this lies somewhere in the middle, and I would give this one 4 stars. Terrific horror serial killer book. Yes. Jumping on over to the fantasy side of things again, we have City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is book 1 in the Divine, I guess it's not on the spine here. Either way, it's book 1 in the Divine Cities trilogy. This is a reread for me. And this is one of my all-time favorite fantasy books, and I gave it 5 stars the first time. I gave it 5 stars the second time. And it's just a really unique fantasy novel. I've never quite read one like it, where basically you have this society that has basically taken over things, and they've gotten rid of all of the magic and all of these different sort of gods. They've gotten rid of them, and society in a lot of places has now flourished because of that. They've gained new technology, but in the first chapter we're introduced to someone who's murdered a very important figure, and someone is sent to try to investigate it, and eventually you start to realize that maybe not all of the magic and maybe not all of the gods are dead, and maybe some of them are coming back. And it's just a very cool, like, lost history kind of fantasy, and I really enjoyed this book, and I very much look forward to reading the sequel, City of Blades, in September. Very much. I'm starting to notice a pattern here, because we're jumping back on the horror train with I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells, which is book 1 in the John Cleaver series. This is the first book in sort of the first trilogy. It's a 6-book series split into 2 trilogies, and this is the very first book, and it's also Dan Wells' debut novel. And like City of Stairs, this is a reread for me. The first time I read this, I believe I gave it 4 stars. The second time, I probably gave it 5 stars. Just knowing more about the series and more about the character, I liked it even more the second time. And for anyone who doesn't already know what the series is about, it's about a 15-year-old named John Cleaver who is diagnosed as being a sociopath, and he is sort of obsessed with serial killers. And it's sort of Desker-esque in that he sets all these rules up because he knows that he's so into serial killers, and he's very addicted to learning about these macabre things. And he doesn't want to set up a scenario where he ultimately kills someone. Hence the title, I Am Not a Serial Killer. But in his small town, when people start being killed off mysteriously, he starts to wonder, well, is there a serial killer in my town? And then things sort of take a weird turn, and it's just a really cool series. Such a really underrated horror series by Dan Wells, and I plan on rereading the series this year. I'm going to be reading books 2 and 3 in September, and then books 4, 5, and 6 are relatively short, so I'm just going to read all of those in October. But if you're interested in this, I highly recommend it. It's such a really cool, different horror novel. And then jumping back onto the fantasy train, we have Theft of Swords by Mako J. Sullivan, which is volume 1 of the Rhaenyra I can't say that word. Volume 1 of the Rhaenyra Revelations. And I read this after I finished his prequel series to this, Legends of the First Empire, which that's one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. So jumping into this one, I wasn't quite sure if I would end up loving this as much, because I do love that series. I am happy to say that I did enjoy this series. I didn't love it necessarily, but I did enjoy it. And I gave this omnibus, because this is books 1 and 2 of the 6-book series. I gave the whole omnibus 3.5 stars. So I did enjoy it, and it was very fun. It was a very fun book. It's very action-packed, very funny. But for me, the characters, a lot of the times, with few exceptions, fell flat for me, which makes sense because this is his debut novel. And with Legends of the First Empire, you could sort of tell that he'd honed in his craft and that he was able to weave in plot development, character, world building, and just he did everything well in that series. Where in this one, you could tell that his character development was kind of put on the back burner, and he was mainly focused on just telling a really fun and compelling story, which is great. And I will be continuing with Volume 2, aka Books 3 and 4, in September. But I gave Theft of Swords 3.5 stars. And then jumping back over to horror for the last book that I finished in August, we have Getaway by Zoe Stage. And Zoe Stage is one of my favorite horror writers working today. She's written Baby Teeth, which is an all-time favorite book for me. Not just in the horror genre, but just in any genre. I love Baby Teeth. And she has a vastly, criminally underrated book, Wonderland, which is a terrific book. 5 stars easily. So I was very excited to jump into this new book, which came out, I think, mid-August. So I was very eager to read this book. So did it hold up for me like her previous 2 books? I did love this book, but I did not give it 5 stars. I gave it 4.5. It wasn't quite as good as her 2 previous books. I had some very minor issues with it, but overall it's just another fantastic entry for Zoe Stage. And I will say my biggest issue with the book is not even the book's fault. It was just my expectations with what I thought was going to happen in this book. With Wonderland, it takes such a weird turn that I was sort of expecting this book to take also a weird turn, but it turns out this book was more of a straightforward horror novel than I was expecting it to be, which wasn't bad. It's just not what I was expecting. So I do plan, or when I do, how do I want to word this? Whenever I do decide to reread this book, pick it back up, I'm going to have the right expectations, and I obviously know what's going to happen. So I can kind of just enjoy it for what it is. And really, I just love Zoe Stage because she has 3 novels out, and they're all completely different. And I love writers, not even just in the horror genre, but in any genre, that can manage to write not the same book over and over and over again. Because a lot of people do that with books and movies and music. They find a formula that works for them, and they just kind of go with it and run with it for as long as they can. But Zoe Stage isn't doing that. She wrote Baby Teeth, which is about a psychopathic little girl who basically wants to kill her mom. And then Wonderland starts out as sort of a modern retelling of The Shining, and then goes in a really weird and, in my opinion, awesome direction. And then this book is sort of 3 friends. 2 of them are sisters, one of them is the friend, and they go backpacking in the Grand Canyon country, and something happens. I'll be very vague. And I thought it was going to go in a weirder direction, but the direction it went in was actually very interesting, and it's not at all what I was expecting, which ultimately I love when any writer, not even horror writers, any genre writer can do that. They can write something that I'm not expecting, and I love it. And I loved this book. Not quite as much, but still 4.5 stars. Terrific read, and obviously Zoe Stage is a must-buy, instant buy author for me now, of course. So yes, these are all of the books that I managed to finish in the month of August. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or on the flip side, if you're interested in picking any of these books up. Please let me know down in the comments below. There we go. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.